All right, folks, we're here at the radio show with Mark Lee right here on IBM TV. And of course, as always, we've got great guests that'll be talking about a lot of great conversations. We know that a lot is going on in the world. Folks have been definitely following what's been happening with the coronavirus as well as with Black Lives Matter and various other things that are happening in our community. We're going to start everything off, and I've got some other guests that'll be joining us as well. But I've got Rico Dawson, who is a performer out of the Goldsboro, North Carolina area, and has definitely been doing some real positive work in that area. So, Rico, how are you doing, and how are you coping in these days and times? I know that a lot of performers have had to stop doing what they're doing, so I was just curious as to how things are going with you, and whether you're still able to get out there and do any performances, or whether you've just been doing everything from your home studios and things of that nature.
Actually, I'm in the process of completing my album. And that's what I've been focusing on. Like everything else globally, everything is shut down. So the same thing, the governor of North Carolina is not having any artists doing anything. So nobody can do anything. So I'm basically working on writing. I've had some opportunities, or some people have reached out to me concerning writing material for other artists. So I'm keeping busy.
That's a great thing that you're able to keep busy during these times and everything. For those that are watching, and we've got folks that are watching from all over the country and all over the world. As a matter of fact, I see my good buddy Tim Sohn has already turned in from Pennsylvania. So tell folks a little bit about your project and about the album, and what kind of music it is, and when they can look for it to drop, and how that planning is going. Like you said, it's definitely harder to do in this era that we're in, but just tell folks a little bit about the album and what it's all about.
Okay. Well, I'm a contemporary Christian artist. And the production, everything, because I write and do all the vocals and everything, and I have a home studio, I'm able to do pretty much everything I need to do from a production standpoint, even with the mastering. I have mastering software as well, and I have a background as well in mixing music as well. So everything I need to do, I can do from home. It's just a matter of now the next phase is getting the, promotion and all of that. So right now I'm in that phase, and hopefully soon that the project will be dropping.
And would you put yourself more in the line of the traditional gospel performers, like the old school gospel performers, or more contemporary? I know that a lot of people, because of what's going on in the world, they're definitely reaching back to trying to find positive messages in their music, whether that's in gospel, whether that's in jazz, whether that's in the various musical forms. But I was just wondering if you could tell a little bit about the ways that you would describe your own personal style.
Well, I think that I'm more or less geared towards the contemporary side of gospel. I have a formal background. I studied music in college, so that helped with the other aspects of genres like classical and stuff like that. But I'm more or less a contemporary artist.
And where did you go to college at? Was it one of the colleges over there in that general area of the Eastern North Carolina? Because I know that East Carolina's got a strong music department. Of course, Central here in Durham has a strong music department. But I was wondering where you went to school to get your musical training, and who are some of the people that inspired you in terms of getting into gospel? Of course, a lot of folks know that Shirley Caesar is from here, and John P. Key and others are from here. But who are some of the folks that inspired you?
Well, I went to college at Elizabeth City State University. I was drawn to that program because they were actually the music industry studies program, and that was set up by the University of Miami, and they set up everything, and I was just drawn to the aspect of the music business side, but you also get the musicianship aspects as well. So that's where I went. I went to Elizabeth City State. As far as influences, I'm inspired by a lot of the gospel artists, even traditional as well as contemporary, because I've been exposed to both. So I can't say who, but a lot of the artists, new and older artists, have inspired me to work on my craft because they do it so well.
Yeah. And I know, like I said earlier, I know that a lot of people are turning to the arts and turning to creative outlets just because of what's going on in the world. How has that helped you in terms of just reaching out to people, but also just in terms of your own well-being? So how has being tied to the music helped you as we've gone through all of these different crises, whether that's the Black Lives Matter movement and how people are tuning in more to race relations, or whether that's the coronavirus, or whether that's the economic crisis that many of us are facing. But how are you using music to help you cope?
Well, music has been therapeutic for me because it has allowed me to take in what I see and hear. Some things you can't. A lot of things it's propaganda. You can't listen to it, but the stuff that is of substance, I listen to it and I take it in, and then that allows me to write what's relevant for this moment. So that it's been therapeutic for me because I don't know how I would be if I was not able to be creative. Because, like you said, it's no longer recording artists, performing artists. So you have to be able to not only perform, but you have to be able to perform in a recording session. So you have to have that creative process, the creative juices flowing. And if you're not able to do that, then it just stifles your creativity and you become frustrated.
I can understand that. I've got a good friend of mine who's actually a funk musician here in this area, here in Durham, but he's originally from New York. And I know he had a guest on one of his shows, actually, I believe it was either yesterday or Saturday. And they were just talking about how sometimes some of the more modern music is a little bit too canned for their taste. And it was like just a little bit too processed and things along those lines. And they don't really feel that it had that same kind of vibe as, say, the music of the 70s or the 80s or even the music of the 60s. I was wondering what some of your thoughts are on that, whether you feel that the music is a little bit too processed now, some of the modern music. Because I know sometimes even if you go to a concert, back when we could go to concerts, they weren't able to recreate what they created in the studio because they weren't used to having that live feel.
Yeah, I'm not only am I a singer, songwriter, and performer, I'm also an educator, and I teach high school chorus. And one of the things that is always a debate is the 70s. And I always tell my students the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Those were times as an artist, you had to be an artist. You had to be able to play at least one instrument. You had to be able to bring something to the table. And today's artists, unfortunately, they don't see the musicianship side as important. And that's why a lot of times they on the business aspect, they're handcuffed because they don't write none of their material. They don't play any of the instruments, so they get no credit. And then, they think is all I have to do is perform and that's the money is going to come. But they call it the music business for a reason. There is a business side to everything that we do. And if you're not well versed in the business side, it will stifle the music side, the creative side, because the business side will cause you not to want to do the music. And you hear those stories time and time again. Some people, they'll do an album and then they fall off and everybody's like, where did they go? And then when you hear a conversation or interview, they'll say the business aspect, they didn't like that. But that goes hand in hand. So in order for you to have longevity, instead of being a one-hit wonder and have a longevity, you have to learn about all of that. You have to learn about wanting to learn how the musicianship side. I remember talking to a young artist 3 or 4 years ago, and all they could do was sing. And I said, you need to learn how to play an instrument, at least play the piano, learn how to write. And the young man took my advice, and he wound up going to college. He graduated with a music degree, and he's also working on his next album. So that's one of the few youngsters that will listen and take heed to your advice and capitalize on it. And he's now, not only can he write, he has a wonderful voice. He can sing. He's more marketable per se. So I really believe that, if people would go back to learning their craft and really take time, and you're right, the music today sometimes lacks that substance. And then when you see them live, you feel like you've been robbed because you paid good money for a high price ticket, and you expect at least the sound quality of the album or better. And then you leave that process, feel like you missing something. And I just think about going back into the Motown era when Berry Gordy started Motown. He had the A&Rs. You know, they taught them how to be artists. And you know, today's records, you know, today's industry is like popcorn. Let's get it out there. And then they come down on the young artist when the artist is not polished. And that's, you know, the industry has to take responsibility for that. If you want a complete product, a polished product, you have to teach. You just can't say, it's just like a child. If you say, okay, go out here and do this or do something in the yard, and you haven't showed them how to do it, it's 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be right. So you're going to be frustrated. So that's what has happened. And it goes back to even now, people don't do projects anymore. Everybody's doing singles. But, you know, it just, hopefully we will go back to the process. Nobody wants to get into the process and grind. And, you know, even with my process, with my project, there were some times that, you know, something didn't sound right and I'll have to scrap it and do it over. But I want it to sound right. So, you know, we have to be more in tune with being individuals as artists and not be cookie cutter. And that has a lot to do with the industry, because I not only as an artist, but as a writer, I've received emails from record companies saying, do you have a song that sounds just like this? And you trying to box people in, and you want to, because they sold a lot of records on that product. Now you want to capitalize and you want to duplicate that same process. But the public has moved on. They want something new. It's just like if you eat, even if you eat your favorite food, at some point, if you eat your favorite food every day, at some point you're going to get tired and you're going to need something else. And that's what's happening. Everybody's cookie cutter. Nobody wants to be individuals. And the individuals that stay true to themselves, they don't get the commercial success because they just don't do that anymore. I've heard a lot of great artists on satellite radio. Just drive down the street and Sirius XM satellite radio, you're going to different radio stations. I'm like, oh my God, that's a phenomenal artist. But that artist, because they don't fit the box, they don't play them on the commercial radio stations, and that's a travesty, man.
Yeah, but that's actually interesting you bring that up, because I know oftentimes commercial radio does not give enough dues to our independent artists. I would actually even argue that sometimes our local independent stations, whether that's low power or our jazz stations and things of that nature, that they don't do a good enough job of getting the word out about our local performers. So I was wondering, how has your response been to that in terms of when you've tried to get either your own work out or other people's work out? Have you had a hard time getting it out into the radio because they are so wanting to get in the established artists, the artists that are already out there?
Yeah, luckily we have a AM radio station, gospel radio station in Goldsboro. The program director, one of the workers there is Mr. Abel Williams, phenomenal. I've created a great relationship with him, and he knows that, you know, I'm not going to send him any music or connect him to a person that's not of credibility. And for example, last year I released the single "Keep Your Head Up," and it's going to be on the album. And I sent it to him, and maybe within 48 hours, he listened to it and he was like, "I like it. I'm going to put it." It was on Wednesdays for the unsigned artists, and I know that he was doing it because I had not personally heard the song, but people in Goldsboro would see me, people that knew me, they would say, "Oh my God, I heard your song on the radio, man. That was phenomenal." And, you know, and then other radio stations in the area. Rejoice America has been very supportive, and then Soulspiration Radio, they've been very supportive. But the big radio stations, yeah, it's like if you don't have somebody of credibility to support you, or company, the first thing they want you to do is advertise with them, and you just want the world to hear your project. But before they play it, they want you to do business with them, advertise with them. And as an independent artist, you don't have the budgets that the major labels have. I just, even in my process of getting ready to promote my project, I'm like, this is a lot of money. But fortunately enough, the digital age, the internet has leveled the playing field, because I remember in the 90s when I had started doing some stuff with other artists and other entities, you had to actually have a CD, and you actually had to go and meet these people. And now you can, email, or you can Skype or whatever, and you can have a face-to-face. So it's that has leveled the playing field some, but still the independent artist does not get the opportunity to really have their music heard because of that. The monopoly and the corporate radio stations, they have a format and they won't deviate from it. You might have a great product, but if you're not going to advertise with them and you're not one of the big artists, it's really hard, man, for the major radio stations if you don't have somebody, backing you up.
Yep, sounds like it. I definitely want to bring on Dr. Steph Johnson as well. She's got a book that talks about Inclusify and things of that nature. So I'm going to bring her up so we can have a conversation with her as well. But before I get to her really quickly, I'm here to bring her up very shortly. I do have Jim Eade, who's actually one of our other show folks here. He does a chess show, so a show revolving around chess, but he is also very much around the West Coast area. And he wanted to know, how do you follow your true passion and still make money? Because you were definitely doing that. And of course, you've said that you have the actual added income of having worked in the education field. But how would you answer his question? How do you follow your true passion and still make money? And then the other thing that I'm curious about is a lot of people are thinking that as we go on in the new world, kind of like develop this new way of doing things, that we're going to see more kind of like a mix of virtual and live. So are you preparing to do that in your own music? Because I don't know whether we're going to, for a while, see live concerts because of them wanting that social distance and things of that nature. So how are you preparing to do that? Are you planning to do more virtual kind of concerts and things of that nature?
I'm actually brainstorming about that because I have been thinking about that, how this next phase is going to play out. Because usually as an artist, you record the project, you do promotion, and the next step, you're preparing to go out and do live performances. Or if you have somebody that's financially backing you, you go on a 10, 15 city tour or whatever. But yeah, I've been thinking about that, and I know that probably virtually is going to have to be the next step, then live performing. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. Now, to answer the question concerning the money aspect, it's hard because you have to be very careful of who you do business with, because some people, if you're true to who you are, people will try to make you compromise. They will. I remember in about 5-6 years ago, I was doing some writing, trying to shop some songs, and I sent this song to a lady who has a company in up north, and it's contemporary gospel, and she talked to me about 45 minutes trying to make me change genres. And she was like, this is not gonna sell, and this is, are you sure this is what you want to do? Because if you come out as a contemporary gospel artist, then you're going to have a lot of, pushback and stuff like that. Are you really living what you're singing about? And I was adamant about, I'm living what I'm writing, singing about. And when she realized that she could not sway me, that deal fell through. And it's been numerous occasions where if you're not sharp on your business side, you can get had. If you're so focused on trying to make it at any cost, you'll sign your life away. And I'm very, very cautious with who I do business with. And if somebody, like 2 people reached out to me today concerning future opportunities, but I let them know in advance. Now, if it's gonna be compromising, then we can't do business. So yeah, you miss out on some opportunities, but you save yourself a lot of heartache.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dr. Steph Johnson, your book is called Inclusify, and of course, a lot of that is about corporations trying to be very much cognizant of their diversity programs and things of that nature. And we do know that a lot of times, a lot of corporations have now started going out there and putting out these kind of like statements about supporting Black Lives Matter, supporting some of the other things that are going on. But that even comes back to what Rico was talking about, that sometimes we have to wonder whether they're actually just doing this because it's the trend of now and they should be just doing it because it's kind of like what everybody wants them to do, or whether they're actually going to do the actions. Because I know that a couple of folks there, I think there was an article today, and I'm going to try to pull it up so I can remember the content of it, but it was actually talking about how a lot of these corporations don't just need to make statements, but they need to have actual diversity training in their offices and actually do some hiring so that they're addressing what's going on, not just with the Black Lives Matter movement, but also women in terms of equity in pay and the LGBT community and a lot of other things that your book touches on. So if you would, I'd like to just hear some of your comments on some of the points that I made.
Yeah, I'd love to know the article that you're referencing. I try to keep up on all of these. I think there's probably 2 ways you can tell if a company's being sincere. One is if they're really talking about their commitment to diversity and inclusion as part of their mission, vision, values. Like, why is it core to them? If it's not, then plan B, I guess, is look at what they're actually doing. So, a lot of companies are giving money. I think that's great. I work on a project with the NAACP. They have been getting a lot of donations from big corporations, and money's great. But that doesn't actually require you to take responsibility and do anything. It's just writing a check. And a lot of these companies, obviously, this is no big deal. So I like to look at what their internal plans are. Are they setting specific numeric goals? Like, we're going to add, 100 Black leaders by the end of 2019, or do a pay audit, and then training you mentioned, or although I think training is not enough. Like, again, that's just writing a check to someone who's going to be a trainer, but like actually committing to making real change. And then they still have to follow through. So, we can all be cynical and say like, it's easier said than done. But I would say if you publicly blast out a specific measurable goal, I feel like they're likely to see it through or put effort forth toward it.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. The article was actually a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually from the Harvard Business Review, and it was actually an article just talking about organizations restructuring their organizations to actually advance racial justice. So not just doing it because it was something that should be done, but something actually having like a concrete plan, I guess, is the best way to put it out and everything. Because as the first part of the article says, the U.S. is at a turning point and the world is watching. The murder of George Floyd, preceded by the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and many, many others, have sparked an outpouring of grief and activism that catalyzed protests in all 50 states and around the world. And then the author was actually an African American, and she said that for Black people, the injustice we feel around the murder of another unarmed Black person is not new, but the scale of recognition of systematic racism and the allyship we are feeling from others is. For diversity equity and inclusion practitioners like her, the influx of, actually like me, the influx of interest we're seeing from organizations that want to both support their Black employees and upskill their workforce around racism, bias, and inclusivity is unprecedented. Plus, all of this is happening, of course, in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic, which they also pointed out was having an outsized impact on African Americans and other minorities. I know that earlier today I was watching a Zoom conference of our our Wake County commissioners, which is one town over. I'm here in Durham, North Carolina, but it was the Wake County commissioners, and they were having a meeting with the sheriff. So I think there was an incident where they had tear gassed some of the protesters, and some of the protesters may have been actually part of that anarchist group that kind of comes into protest and everything. But they were also talking about having these racial diversity, racial sensitivity training for their employees. So in your research, in your book, have you found that those kind of things are effective, or are they things that need to be even more detailed and more worked on?
I would say unconscious bias training, privilege training, like any of those trainings, it's not that they're not effective. They're ineffective when that's all that an organization is doing. It might change people's attitudes, or maybe it changes people's views. They have a broader understanding of diversity and inclusion and systemic bias, but it doesn't actually change your behavior. So I think you want to change behavior, right? Just all of us knowing together about racism doesn't actually stop racism. So I think that do the training for sure, but make that one step in explaining why you're engaging in greater systematic changes. Why are you changing your hiring, your promotion procedures, the way that managers give feedback, or all of these things? Use the unconscious bias training as a vehicle to launch those other programs and goals that you might have. And then I think it works. So like if you set diversity goals and then give people training, having set the goals actually makes the training more effective. I don't want to get rid of them because I do them all the time. But I just think and I tell companies when I do training for them, like, I'll do the training, but I hope you'll consider working with me to do much more than this 1 hour, or now it's like 45-minute webinar, right? Which is enlightening, and it's great research, and but you actually have to do something. It's like doing nothing has gotten us exactly where we are.
So tell us, how did you actually get into this field? I mean, and also tell our listeners, because we got listeners from all over the world and everything, where exactly you are located at. But how did you first get involved in this field of doing this kind of equity kind of engagement and things of that nature?
Yeah, so I'm in Boulder, Colorado at the University of Colorado. I snuck into my office today so that you didn't have to listen to my kids screaming in the background of your podcast, because it's so embarrassing. But, and how did I get into it? So, for me, I guess I would say, I think I tried not to study diversity because I was, I'm a woman, I'm Mexican, I'm like first generation college student, all of these, I guess, like stereotypes of the people who study and research diversity. Like, I think I am all of them. So I thought, okay, I'm going to study leadership so I can be accepted into the patriarchy, right? So I'm just like I'm committing the exact error that I tell people all the time not to do. But at the time, this seemed like a very logical thing to do. And I think that's why our systems continue. But even though I wasn't trying to look at diversity, I studied leadership. And if you study leadership, it's basically like you're studying bias, right? Like every study, there's higher expectations for people of color to get in the same roles, or the same behaviors that are really effective for men are ineffective for women. And so I was like, well, let me just fix these problems in my data. And then at some point, I think probably as I got older and actually got a job and stuff, this was the most interesting and the most important thing that I was studying before it became important in the global spotlight. To me, it was like, I actually think we should all business professors should just be studying this one thing, because this is the biggest issue facing businesses today, I'd say.
And you actually brought up a point, the fact that you have Mexican descent and everything. And I'm oftentimes fascinated by the fact that too often, this is just my opinion, people try to put everybody in that same Latin category, whether it's Latinx, which is the young Latins, or whether it's whatever. And I'm sitting there going, like, last time I checked, Latin America is all of Central America, all of South America, and of course the people that have moved to other parts of the world as well. So I don't even know how you can put them all in one box, but it does seem like we as a society try to put particularly the Latin American population in one box. I would also argue we probably do that with the Asian American population as well. So I was just wondering what some of your thoughts are on that, because I know oftentimes, like even when I've done events and I've done festivals, they'll be like, we need to get some Latin music. And I agree we have to get some Latin music, but one of the things I've always wanted to do is not just get one style of Latin music. Like if we get somebody from a Brazilian music, I like to have somebody like a Mexican band or some other form of that wide range of styles that comes out of Latin America.
Yeah. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and I think like a large percentage of the Hispanic community in Los Angeles is Mexican, and California borders Mexico's. I don't know. I guess to me, I was always Mexican. I understand when I fill out the census, I put like Spanish American or something, but I guess it's just being Mexican. I feel like you're so different culturally from someone who's, say, Puerto Rican, right? Like it seems totally different. And I think you're right about lumping all Asians together. It's like equally absurd because we have like Eastern Asians, Western Asians. Like that's like calling all of North and South America the America people, right? And I see it with African Americans and Black people being called African American who are in no way African American. They might have like a totally be Dominican or something, and we just like are trying to make big categories, probably so we don't screw up, right? Like I'll just call you a Latina and then I'm safe, right? But it doesn't. It's not. I mean, that's not the best outcome. Like, why don't you just try to understand the people that you're interacting with? Mm-hmm. Because if it were like my sports team that I'm a fan of, you'd feel perfectly comfortable to ask me, are you a football fan? What team do you support? But when it comes to race, like people are super awkward.
And not only that, but then there's also the matter of identifying with self-identifying. Like I said, I know that I definitely identify as a light-skinned African-American, but I have cousins that only claim the native side of their ancestry. And I know that Rico's over there in Goldsboro, so he probably knows some folks that only claim the native side of their ancestry as well, because they, and some of them are just as dark-complected as Rico, but they only want to claim the native side of their ancestry for whatever reasons, whether that's government grants that they might be getting, whether that's the way that they were acclimated, the way that they were raised or whatever, but they're very much involved in the powwow culture and things of that nature, because we do have some active native communities here in North Carolina. And like I said, some of them are more traditionally recognized than others. So we do have that going on as well. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, and I'd like to hear from both of you actually, about people that decide to self-identify in one way or another based on what they think their race is.
I always ask people, how do you identify? Or do you identify as African American? Or do you identify as Black? Because I think it is kind of up to people. Like, so I'm Mexican, as I said, but I'm also half white. But I grew up with, my parents were divorced. I grew up with my mom, and my mom's the Mexican half, in like a Spanish speaking household in a totally Hispanic neighborhood. And so there is this very, I think, a very big part of me that's white. It probably is all over my face, but to me, it's like not how I identify, because that's not how I guess I grew up. So I kind of think it's up to you to choose what feels like your identity. I don't know. What do you think, Rico?
That's funny. That's a funny question. As y'all both were talking, I was
Rico
thinking about assignments. One of my teaching assignments was in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and I taught at Rocky Mount High School. And it's a lot of Indian. It's an Indian population down there. And I was thinking about this young lady. She looked African American, and I wasn't trying to be mean, but when I was talking to her, you're black and everything. And she was like, no, I'm Indian. I'm like, oh, okay. And that's what she identified with. And she was like going through the whole spiel, telling me about the powwows and the ceremonies and stuff like that. She actually brought for her senior project, when North Carolina had instituted the senior project, she actually brought one of the garments that they wore for the ceremonial dance. It was beautiful. So yeah, I've been in the education. I've run into that, and I quickly apologize because you go by what you see, and I have a lot of students that are biracial, and a lot of people in education, especially in the public education, they don't want to discuss the elephant in the room, and I'm one of the teachers that will, and it's uncomfortable, but I have created an environment in my classroom where students feel safe and they feel like they can talk, and we have dialogue about that because it's at some point, if you don't educate your students, they're going to receive the education in the street, and if you have not educated them right, then they're going to get misinformed. So yeah, I've had those instances in teaching that, and even working in music, that you talk to a person and through conversation you find out that they're of Dominican or Puerto Rican, and they don't, you look at their skin color and you're like, oh, they're black, but then when you talk to them, they're like, no, I'm Jamaican. And like I have one of my students, she's Jamaican and white. So it's diversity, and you teach that inclusion and diversity, make people feel safe about and being who they are, and not make them feel like they're lesser than. And when you create an environment like that, then for me, being a musician and being a teacher, chorus teacher, and I tell my students all the time, your emotions bleed into the music. Mm-hmm. And if you are sad or if you're angry, you sing exactly how you feel. And depending on what we're singing, I don't need that emotion. So a lot of times before we sing, we have conversations, and I ask them, how you feeling? What's going on? Because I need them to be locked in. So yes, those diversity things, we can't avoid them. We can't keep right now, especially what's going on now. It's been so long where people don't want to talk about it, but now you got to talk about it now. It's not going anywhere. And even with my wife, she's an administrator at a community college, and they're already talking about how are they going to address this? Strategies. They're trying to be progressive. So hopefully the public schools are doing the same thing, because it's going to be addressed. It's and if you don't address it, then it could be explosive. Because
and I was wondering, speaking of the explosive nature, I was wondering, I'd like to hear from you, Dr. Johnson. There were definitely some explosive things that were said when folks decided to go on what some people might consider native land, when they went and did the whole Mount Rushmore kind of thing. And just in terms of that, how do you feel that played into that diversity conversation? Because, when I hear terms like cultural war, or we're in the middle of a cultural war, that worries me, those kind of like divisive kind of conversation points. Because to me, that seems very divisive.
I'm totally with you. I feel like this should be a time of coming together, but I guess that's not on everyone's agenda to bring people together. And instead, I feel like, I guess I see so much of the opposite of like even more overt racism and people diminishing other cultures. And even with the Black Lives Matter movement, I don't know about you guys, but like my feed on like Facebook and stuff and Twitter, there's like always these backlash posters. Maybe some of them are fake, whatever, but who are just like, no, we can't be doing this right now. We need to keep America. It's like, what do you think America is? Like, we're a whole bunch of immigrants. And that's what why are we going to start all of a sudden not accepting difference and tolerating difference. That's what America's all about. So I feel like there's a lot of people who capitalize on keeping great economic and personal divides among society. I think it's just like getting worse. I don't know what you guys think.
I agree with you on that. I was just curious to hear from both you, Dr. Johnson, as well as Rico, what you're thinking about like the whole thing. There's definitely a movement to bring down the Confederate monuments and things of that nature. That's where a lot of the conversation winds up happening. But I was just curious to hear your own thoughts on that. Some of these monuments being changed. Of course, we're seeing buildings that were named after folk, including sometimes folks that we didn't even think historically were that racist, but then people will bring up a little bit more of their history. I think there's been some conversation around Woodrow Wilson, who a lot of folks think of in one way, but apparently he had some other history as well. So I was just curious as to what some of y'all's thoughts were about that, where we're seeing people wanting to, and some people, and that comes back to your point about Facebook and Twitter, are saying that that's us trying to erase the history. I don't know that I necessarily want to erase the history. Maybe we can just move it to a museum.
What do you think, Rico? There's probably more of this in the South than there is in the Rocky Mountains.
It is. It has been a touchy subject, and like y'all said, my Facebook feed has been. I've had to delete some people because they let it be known their true colors. You in adversity and controversy, you find out who really has your best interest. And unfortunately, there were some people that I went to high school with, and you know that you kept in contact. But when you're saying crazy stuff on Facebook, then I have an issue with that, because you're saying that if you're having an issue with Black Lives Matter, then you're saying my life don't matter. And then, you hear this conversation where, you different. No, I'm not. I'm African. I'm a Black man. So, there's no difference. Either you're for equality or you're not. You can't straddle the fence. You're either or at this point. And, that's because we've had people that, that are friendly, but they don't want to really back us, And
Rico, and then I want to bring you back to something and hear from Dr. Johnson as well. But you actually bring up a good point. I think that no matter what your field is, whether you're a certified professional, I know friends of mine that are professors at our local university here, North Carolina Central University, as well as Duke, that will tell you that they still are getting profiled, whether they're going to the store or whether they're going to wherever. So as an African-American male that's in a rural town of Goldsboro, do you still feel that you're getting profiled sometimes when you go to the stores, even though you are definitely in a education field, you're a musician, you're probably very active in your church because you're a gospel musician. So, but even with all of that being tied to the community, are there times that you feel that people are profiling you?
Of course. Even when I started in education, you would see it. It would be it'd be subliminal. I shared this with some of my students. I was teaching, and the arts coordinator for the county, not the county that I'm in now, said that if you're doing great things, let us know. We'll put it on the district site. Great. So I was interviewed by Indie Spirit magazine out of Boston, Massachusetts, and it was talking about how music education correlates and relates to the music industry. What can we do in the educational component that will make the industry better? So I had an article. It was a 2 or 3 page article. It was a great article. And I shared that with the arts coordinator of the district. Well, nothing ever happened. Nobody knew about it. And I felt some type of way about it. So I was talking to one of my colleagues one day about it, and the principal of the school walked by and overheard our conversation. And she was like, "What are you talking about?" And I told her, and she was like, "I didn't hear anything about it. Have you told this to the district?" I was like, "Yeah." So she was very upset, and she called some folk And then one of my white counterparts wrote a cheesy book, and they had a book signing. So I'm like, oh, so it's like that. So I knew how to move from that point on. In that district, it was 30, 32 schools. It was maybe 4 or 5 Black music teachers in the county. So it was, you felt that vibe when you walked into professional developments. Even when they would share information to their clique, you won't get the information, and then you will see information. You'll see like some of their students was nominated for the honors course, and I'm like, oh, they had an honors course? I got some students that would have loved to audition. So stuff like that would happen, and then when you would address it, it was, oh, I forgot to put you. No, you didn't. You did that on purpose. So little stuff like that. And you have to be professional, and you have to bite your tongue sometimes. It's hard. It's very hard. So like you said, Mark, in every profession, this is something that we of color, people of color, have to deal with. And then when you call them on it, they feel like that you're threatening them, or you're calling them out, making them feel it's an uncomfortable thing. But if you do right by people, no matter what the color, you should be judged the person by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And that's what we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's very true. What advice did you give to corporations, Dr. Johnson? And tell us a little bit about little bit more about the book and why you decided to do the book. Like I said, I did mention the book and a little bit about what it's about, but just what advice do you give to corporations when whether it's in school, like where Rico's at, or whether it's a big corporation like an IBM or a Cree or one of the big corporations? What advice, where do you start at in terms of giving advice?
I think the first thing is to do an audit of what your organization really looks like, because people might think they're diverse, or they have, well, I'll use the case of women. Like there's a lot of women in entry-level roles, but then like no women at the top, right? And in their mind, they're actually pretty diverse, but in reality, they're not looking at the vertical, right? Like you need diversity everywhere. Is there diversity in your supply chain? And then when you know where you are, I guess I think the first place to start is with goals of like, what do you want to be? What do you want your company to look like? And then from there, you fill in programs that are going to get you there, hopefully using research-based, like evidence-based decisions, because otherwise you can just, I guess, be allocating your money in a way that is not going to actually help change the numbers. But so that's the first thing, but that's really focused on diversity rather than inclusion, which is really what Inclusify is about, which is if you are successful at making your company more diverse, you have to make it a place, like you said, Rico, that feels safe for people. And so otherwise they're just going to leave. And then you've just wasted a whole bunch of money recruiting and hiring talented employees who are just going to go somewhere else. So then that's about creating a space where people feel like they can belong, but still while being their unique self. They don't have to cover or mask aspects of their identity in order to fit in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just along those same lines, and I just wanted to know what your thoughts on this, because I think a lot of times when we think of inclusion, we automatically go to two factors, which is race and gender. But I mean, there's also orientation and religious diversity. So I was wondering, when you talk to folks, do you touch on that? Because I know that I worked at a place one time and there was a gentleman who was Muslim American. So he definitely around the midday would have to take a break. And we just understood that he was going to have to take that prayer break and everything. And then there were some people that were even going through, it was an education company. So there were some people that were going through life transitions, and they might be switching genders and things of that nature. So I was just wondering, how do you teach those kind of things in inclusion? Because those are things, well, religion's been out there for a long time. I mean, we were raised as a quote unquote Puritan country, but we have so many diverse religions, and there's so many various religions out there, and some people that are even non-religious. But then we've also seen the growth in the LGBT movement, which has definitely added that factor as well. So I'm just wondering some of the newer factors and some of the factors that aren't the what I would consider the go-to too, which is definitely gender and race and ethnicity.
I think it's all important. I think we're probably doing the worst on race. But there's also intersectional identities as well. So if I'm a Muslim woman, now I have kind of two different marginalized identities. I think it's important to pay attention to all of those things, but I guess I focus more on race and gender because I think that's where we have the farthest way to go. There's the greatest inequality there. And if you created a more equitable workplace with the goal of racial equality, I think the other stuff would happen, right? If you have an inclusive company, it's going to be inclusive for everyone, for LGBTQ, for persons of different religions, for veterans, for older workers. I think we're just a little bit better at maybe those other categories than we are race, and particularly right now. It's like so clear that we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, definitely. And even on the gender side, I remember that when Title IX came out, everybody was very excited about that because they thought that it would do a lot of gender leveling of the field with the two genders, but definitely the two main genders because people might identify in other ways as well. But definitely they thought there would be some leveling of the fields, but now we're finding that a lot of the athletes that are women are not getting paid the same kind of money as our male athletes and things of that nature. So we're finding out that it's not as fair as people may have thought it was going to be. So I was wondering, did you think that Title IX did as good as it could, or do you think that there should have been more actions in those realms? Because I do know that there's even some companies here, like here, a lot of people are very proud of the work that SAS does, which is a major corporation, just for the way that they handle families and the way that they take care of their young parents that are also working. They've got, I think, a daycare on site and some other things that are very much ways that they address the corporate responsibility of being a big corporation, but also knowing that they have young families there that are working for them and that they need to have some sort of benefits provided to them so they can have a comfortable work environment.
Yeah. So this will be my closing thought. And that is, I think it was a good leap forward. And I think when we look at progress historically, it's not so linear that it's like, we're always building. I think it goes through like big leaps, and I think that was true for Title IX, and then nothing. And then maybe Me Too was a big leap, and then maybe, hopefully we're not falling back to nothing. But I think we see the same thing with racial equality. This isn't something that happens gradually over the time. It takes shocks to the system. It takes real intention. It takes like what we're seeing right now, which is it's on the top of mind for everything you read on the news, or like this is something that everyone's thinking about all the time, and that's hopefully we'll make a big leap, and then we can keep going until the next big leap. But I think it has to be that, or it's like it's going to take 170 years to get anywhere if we just kind of snail pace along little by little, year by year. But I do have to say farewell and thank you so much for having me.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Before you leave, and I just wanted to make two quick comments. I do need you to tell how folks can get your book because they might not know how to reach Inclusify. So I do need you to tell them how they can reach the book. And that's actually interesting that you brought up that point because I was having a conversation with some friends of mine just about activism in general, because that's one of my big beefs. There was actually a major activist here in the North Carolina area. But I think that we do have this habit of, and it's not just activism, it's just life in general. We have these habits of creating these great initiatives, these great things that we want to do, and amazing things. And we even put out a little bit of a plan. It even comes back to Rico's part about music and music education. But we put out these great plans, but then we don't have a plan. So since we don't have a plan, it kind of falls by the wayside. And then we wonder what happened to that initiative.
Yeah. Well, you can get Inclusify anywhere books are sold. I have a webpage, inclusifybook.com. But it's a HarperCollins book, so you can get it on HarperCollins or Amazon or Target or Walmart or I think Barnes and Noble is a bookstore, right? Or local bookstores have it. So you can really get it anywhere. If people want to know more, they can please visit my website, which is also like my name, Dr. Steph Johnson, and on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that jazz. I would love to connect.
Well, I definitely appreciate you being on. I know we were trying to work this out so that you could get on at some point. So I definitely appreciate your insight. Like I said, I met you through my friend Tree when you were on his show. So I definitely am glad that you were able to be on this show as well and share some of your insight. And like I said, I'm not going to hold you up, but if you got any final thoughts just in terms of words of encouragement for people as they're dealing with everything from race relations to coronavirus or anything like that that you just want to share real quickly. And I'm going to give Rico that same opportunity, but definitely before you check out, what words of advice would you give?
So I am super optimistic, and I'll tell you why. For so long, when I've been studying diversity and inclusion and working with companies, the main impediment to progress was the status quo. Well, that's not how we do things. That's not our strategy. That's not our business plan. And guess what? All of your strategies, all of your business plans, everything has been completely redone thanks to COVID. And so there's no like, well, back to business as usual. We're all going to have to rebuild our workplaces anyway. So why not rebuild it in a way that's more equitable, that's actually going to improve your business and have a positive impact on society at the same time?
I appreciate that. And it's a very powerful message and definitely one that we should look into because I agree. It's not going to be the same for anybody. I know education is not going to be the same for you. You're probably going to be doing a combination of virtual and in-person things. I know that here they've been talking about everything from like a week on to a week off or doing various breaks up in the class. There's various kinds of proposals, but they definitely involve us not being in the traditional way of doing things, even in education.
I know. Yeah, it's crazy times.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Dr. Johnson, and I appreciate you being on. So I'm going to definitely continue the conversation just real briefly with Rico, and then we'll wrap up the show. But Rico, what are some of your thoughts just in terms of like positive thoughts and ways that you would like to see people go about? Like I said, you are an educator, and we brought that up even in the conversation with Dr. Johnson. But what are some of your thoughts about what the new normal is going to be? Because everybody talks about the new normal, and I imagine even in your school that y'all are probably trying to figure out what that's going to look like, and what are some of the proposals that people are looking at? Are y'all looking at, like I mentioned, I've heard something, I think one was like 1 week on, 1 week off. I've heard breakups within the week, like 2 days on, 2 days off with a mixed day or a optional day or something like that. But what kind of thoughts are you hearing that people are proposing, and what do you think that the new normal will look like in terms of education and also in terms of music?
Well, they are, the district is talking about virtual at least once a week or something of that sort. They're also talking about some students coming in and some students doing virtual. And then, and other things they've talked about. They actually sent out last week a survey to the parents concerning how do they feel about virtual learning as well as in person. I know talking to some parents, they were not, they struggled with the maintaining the atmosphere of learning at their homes because a lot of the parents were workers. They had to go to work. So, you left students there not unmonitored. And, one of my colleagues always says, especially teenagers, they're always going to take the pathway of least resistance. So if they have all day to do some work and there's nobody to monitor them, they're going to take their time. And 9 times out of 10 is not going to be right. Or in my situation, when we went totally online, there were some students that didn't show up for learning. And I would call the parents and they would say, well, I thought they were doing it. I was like, no, they're not participating. So that's one of the challenges that they're going to have. But they have not made a decision as based upon, they're going to base that upon the survey. Music, eventually at the beginning, it's going to be those, there's going to be some virtual performing. And hopefully we can transition into going back to live performing. So yeah, that's going to be the thing right now. Another thing, I just pray that, people will judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin, because, I've always heard never judge a book by its cover. And when you judge a book by its cover and you don't open it and read it for yourself, and then you go by what somebody else say, and I just think about some people say, well, don't go look at that movie, or don't look at that movie on TV. It's not good. But that's your perception of that movie. I may look at that movie and I may like it. So, I just pray people would love each other and give each other a chance. Don't make assumptions about a person. You've never met them. You've never talked to them. You've never spent time with them. As a matter of fact, on one of the songs on the CD project is called "Supposed to Be," and it touches on that. So that's gonna be I think one of the songs on the project that's going to be a topic of discussion, and it will start opening up dialogue about the elephant in the room.
Yeah, it'll be great, and I know that'll definitely be something that folks will be looking forward to. As we wrap up the show and everything, how can folks reach you in terms of hearing your music, and also just in terms of they want to continue conversation with you? But are there any like YouTube sites or any things that people can actually go to listen to your music? Actually, if there is, I can even pull it up and possibly even give them a taste of what your music is about. But are there any sites that they can go to learn more about what your sound is as of now?
I have two singles out. One single is "Keep Your Head Up." Both of my singles are on all the digital platforms, so they can just type up my name and type up "Keep Your Head Up," and it's gonna probably some different songs are gonna be, but mine is contemporary gospel, and you can go to that. I have a LinkedIn account. I have a Twitter account. My Twitter account is at Rico5012. I also have Instagram at RLD081268. And that's how people can keep in correspondence with me. Like I said, I'm a singer-songwriter, so I'm open to write for other people. But I'm currently putting the finishing touches on this project. I think it's going to be a blessing to people, especially "Supposed to Be." I just really feel it's relevant for this time, and it's going to create dialogue. I really feel if you really listen to the lyrics and take it to heart, everybody, regardless of color, it's going to create a dialogue where we have to talk and have to really find out about who we are and who, because like I said, adversity shows you your true colors and who you really are. And unfortunately, we are finding out that people that we have eaten with, we have taken trips with, and we thought that were friends, really their true feelings came out. And it's been hurtful. It's been a hurtful time for some people. I've had some high school classmates that have been friends with people for years, and then they really showed their true colors, and it really hurt them to the core, because they were in their weddings, and they've taken trips together. They've they've been an integral part of the interwoven into those people's lives. So I just pray that people just see each other for the content of the character.
I agree. Definitely, that's what we need to have more of, and things of that nature. You definitely left some folks with some powerful thoughts and things of that nature. I'll get with my producers, and we'll try to find copies of the music and put it on our website in addition to this show that's been airing live for the last a little bit over an hour. But we'll definitely find ways that we can share the music that you put out there. And definitely when the album is released, we'll definitely get that word out there also through our different channels. But I want to thank both you, Rico, for being on, Dr. Johnson, who's already left, but I want to thank her for being on as well, because I thought that y'all brought some very enlightening conversation in about both what's going on musically, what's going on with the coronavirus, and definitely about the whole concept of diversity and the way that we can address diversity in this day and time. So definitely want to thank you for being on the show, and you are a great guest, and I look forward to hopefully having you back on in a very near future, both on this show as well as on my other show that I do, which is the usually on Monday nights we do that, but this Monday my co-partner in that is going to give us a break. So we'll be back doing both shows on the 13th. So hopefully in the near future, we'll get you on some of the other shows as well to continue this dialogue. But I do want to thank you for being one of my guests, and definitely I thought that you brought some great points here, and hopefully folks will tune into IBM.TV. Of course, we air this on YouTube, Facebook, various other platforms as well. And of course, they can also go back and listen to our conversation. And like I said, we'll hopefully have some other conversations. And IBM TV has all kinds of other amazing shows. They do a Spiritual Saturday, which has got people that are covering their spirituality from around the world. There's actually a gentleman from Nigeria who actually has some spiritual base in his country and is very much of a Christian-based person, but he comes on and talks about that. There's a Buddhist young lady, I think she's Buddhist, but definitely one of the Eastern European religions that gives us some pointers in terms of mindfulness and meditation and things of that nature. So they do that on Saturdays. And then we have Sundays, which has a lot of different kind of programming, including a funk show that I alluded to earlier that my friend Zach does. So, and then there's all kinds of other things. We do Podcaster Thursdays. So there are all kinds of great programming that exist on IBM.TV. So hopefully folks can tune into that on a regular basis. And, I know they're always looking for good programming as well. So you might even want to reach out to them about some of your gospel stuff and maybe even creating some gospel programming that you might be interested in doing with them. So definitely just wanted to put that out there as a possibility. But definitely enjoyed our conversation, and we'll definitely have to continue it. Like I said, I was in Goldsboro sometime back doing the Road to the Apollo, and I need to get back there. But I know there's not much travel right now with what's going on with the pandemic and things. But when things level back out and I can get out and travel some more, hopefully we'll bring that Road to the Apollo back up to Goldsboro, and hopefully we can get you either as one of the contestants or, if not a contestant, as a special guest.
Okay. I would love that.
Sounds good. So that being said, that's going to wrap up this edition of the radio show with Marc Lee right here on IBM TV. And we definitely enjoyed having the conversation with Rico Dawson as well as Dr. Steph Johnson. So definitely go back and listen to the show if you missed it for whatever reasons. And definitely, hopefully, you will be engaging in the conversation. If you got any comments that you would like to leave me, you can definitely leave them on our YouTube pages, our Facebook pages, and our various other platforms as well. So definitely looking forward to hearing from others. I know we've got another amazing show next week. I think that's going to be dealing with reparations, and I've got some other guests that are lined up for that as well, including some musicians and things of that nature. So definitely looking forward to those conversations that'll be coming up right here. But in the meantime, I'm going to go find me something to eat because I heard somebody mentioning food earlier, and I may be a little bit hungry. So I'm going to have to go find some food right now since it's a very late lunch, almost dinner time, and I didn't have any lunch. So I'm going to go find me some food right now. So until next week, y'all have a good one, and we'll see you then.